This endless desire to try and keep up with everyone else. This endless want to have what they've got. Strive after their achievement. To look at them and think our life is so weak and shallow in comparison. That feeling will rot your bones. In our life, we spend quite a lot of time, we're always comparing stuff, aren't we? Like comparing insurance deals with like the little meerkat coming and helping you compare insurance. We're comparing specs. Like specs on gadgets. If you're bad at comparing insurance or mortgage rates or something like that, if you're bad at that, it's going to cost you a bit of money. It's going to cost you a bit of money in the long run. We know that's true. But if we play the comparison game in our lives, in our relationships, where we're endlessly comparing ourselves to others, well, it costs us more than a bit of money. It costs us our peace, doesn't it? It costs us our peace. It costs us our joy. It's a costly game to play if you play the comparison game in your relationships. And I would suggest that there's a couple of ways we can play this comparison game. Now, the first way is what we might call like comparing downwards, where we compare ourselves to those around us who we maybe think are not doing as well. And we do that in order to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. So this comparison game where we're like, well, I know I'm not great, but at least I'm not like that. Or we adopt this posture of judgmentalism, putting others down. And it's almost like we feed our ego by putting others down. Jesus tells an interesting story about this. He's pointing out that this is a terrible way to live. And he tells a story about a man who goes to the temple and he prays. And Jesus tells this story. He says, the religious leader, this man, this proud man, stands in the middle. And he says, God, I thank you that I am not like these tax collectors. We got any tax collectors in today? HMRC? Guys, you are so welcome. You're so welcome. The guy's like, thank you, God, I'm not like these tax collectors. God, I thank you, I'm not like these robbers. Got any thieves in today? God, I thank you. This is what he says. God, I thank you, I'm not like the tax collectors. God, I thank you, I'm not like these robbers. God, I thank you, I'm not like these adulterers. I'm not going there, don't worry. I thank you, I'm not like these adulterers. He says, I thank you, I'm not like these people. And Jesus tells this story because clearly this religious leader is feeding his ego. Not because he knows he is loved by God, but instead he's feeding his ego by putting other people down. By saying, well, at least I am not like these sinners, these tax collectors, these thieves, these adulterers that I surround. At least I'm not like that. And Jesus tells the story and he says, that man does not go home justified. Why? Because when we feed ourselves, instead of knowing that we are loved, if we feed ourselves by judging others, then it wrecks our soul. It changes our posture from one of humility to one of pride. It eats into us. And Jesus tells this story to say, don't be like that guy. He doesn't go home justified because he's trying to feed himself, feed his stature, beef himself up by putting other people down. There's a story at the start, right at the start of the Bible. And I think it's this beautiful image that helps me think through this. It's a beautiful image of two trees. And right at the start of the Bible, we read the story of God creating the world. And it says, in the garden, God puts two trees. One is the tree of life, and one is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. My favorite theologian's guy called Greg Boyd writes about this in his book, Repenting of Religion. And he says, guys, you've got to feed yourself from the right tree. You choose. This isn't just a story that happened a long time ago. It's not just a story in scripture. This is a story of how we feed ourselves. It's a story of us today. And he says, guys, you've got to feed yourself on the right tree. Because you can feed yourself on the tree of life. Feed yourself from the tree of life. Feed yourself knowing that there is a God who loves you, who accepts you. Because why do we compare ourselves? It's because we're insecure, isn't it? We're insecure, so we start putting other people down. He says, feed yourself on that tree of life. Feed yourself knowing you are accepted. Feed yourself knowing that you are loved. Feed yourself knowing that you are a child of God. Because from that security, you will no longer feel the need to push other people down. Don't feed yourself from the wrong tree. Don't feed yourself from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That time that we put ourselves in the position of God as a judge. That time where we get to decide who's in and who's out. That position we put ourselves in, where we get to decide what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. When we put ourselves in that judging position, no, don't feed yourself on that tree. Don't feed yourself on that tree. As I said, I think it comes from insecurity. I think there's an insecurity that we can sometimes have that causes us to, like, people watch, criticize what they're wearing. Sometimes it's our insecurity that causes us to, like, slag off our boss or our church leader. Don't do it. But there's an insecurity that feeds our ego by putting other people down, by judging others. Feed yourself on the tree of life. Some of us need to change the volume of our internal monologue, because too often we are hearing lies that tell us we are not good enough, and that drives us to compare ourselves to others. It drives us to try and feed our ego, to elevate ourselves, because we are hearing lies. We're hearing lies from our friends or our parents. We're hearing lies from the bathroom scales. We're hearing lies from ourselves, and instead we need to turn that volume down in order to instead turn up the volume of a God who says you are loved. You are accepted. You are a child of God. And from that security, may you nourish yourself on the tree of life, knowing that you have got a hope and a mercy here, that you'll be free from the need to play God, feeding from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, deriving your self-worth from putting others down, rather than a self-worth from knowing that you are loved by a mighty Father. I would say most of my thoughts of comparison are not that downward comparison. I say most of my thoughts are a kind of upward comparison, an envy, a looking at people who I think of like, got it a bit more together than me. Like that jealousy of what they've got. Now, I'm not on Instagram. Who's on Instagram? A few people, yeah, a couple of. I mean, I don't really but I understand the premise, right? I understand the premise. The premise is you get all of your friends to post the highlight of their week, and then you look at their highlight and you compare it to your normality, and then you feel bad about yourself. That's the premise. I get it. The thing is, they also worked out that many people don't have enough friends to keep that going for very long. So instead of you just following your friends' highlights, you can now follow famous people's highlights. Because let me tell you, no matter how good a week you've had, there's a good-looking millionaire out there who's had a better week than you. And now you can scroll through that and feel bad about yourself. There's the whole business model is driven by our desire to be envious, to look at other people and want what they've got. I could get myself worked up into this feeling of being jealous of individual bits of their life. A wise person told me once, you can't be jealous of one thing and ignore the rest. Because often we do that, don't we? We find one bit about your life and we're jealous of that, and then we ignore the rest. You can't do that. You can't be jealous of someone's pay packet and ignore the hours they have to work. You can't be jealous of their car and ignore the debt. You can't be jealous of someone's relationship and ignore how much they have to suddenly care about soft furnishings and scented candles. You can't do that. Why? Because envy will eat away at you. It will eat away at you. It says this in Proverbs 14:30. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Rots the bones. This endless desire to try and keep up with everyone else. This endless want to have what they've got. Strive after their achievements. To look at them and think our life is so weak and shallow in comparison. That feeling will rot your bones. The bones that give you strength to stand. Bones that give you strength to stand on your own 2 feet and with your back straight, it will be rotted away by that envy, that insidious desire to have what they've got. Proverbs says, a heart at peace, being content and grateful for what you have, gives life to your body, but envy will rot your bones. There's a wonderful book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes, which is an eclectic mix of philosophy and interesting like stories and phrases. It's a really interesting read. And there's a great bit about this very issue in Ecclesiastes 4. It says this from Ecclesiastes 4, verses 4 to 6. And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. Toil and achievement. I mean, toil is an interesting word, isn't it? It's not good work. Like good work, we all want to do good work, meaningful work that brings us life and life to those around us. That's good. But toil's hard. Toil is hard, it's laborsome, it's difficult, it's burdensome. Toil is a really unpleasant thing to be engaged with, to toil. And the way that the writer of Ecclesiastes is using it here is exactly that way. This negative toil full of brambles and thistles and blood and mud, this toil that is unpleasant. And all of that springs from one person's envy of another. I'm not saying all work is bad, far from it. What the Ecclesiastes writer is saying is that there's a way of holding yourself in work that will rip you up and leave you cut and bruised and hurt when you do that out of a need to get what someone else has got. There's a way of holding yourself in life and in work where you are grabbing after the achievements and the accomplishments of someone else, driven by envy. It's toil. And this refrain, which comes quite a lot in Ecclesiastes, this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Because deep down we know this, but you don't ever win, do you? If you have this inner voice telling you to go after what someone else has got, like, you never win. You never reach the end. No one wins the rat race. I remember when I was a teenager, I was quite insecure about my popularity or lack of. I wasn't insecure about how many friends. I've got so many friends. This different. No, I was insecure about. But I remember a question came into my head that genuinely changed my whole perspective on it. And one day, I still remember, I was getting stressed about it. I was very insecure about it. And the question came into my head: how many friends would be enough? How many friends would be enough? And that question changed my whole outlook, because I realized there was no number. Maybe for you, that's a different question, like, how much would be enough? How many cars would be enough? How many promotions would be enough? Whatever it is that you feel endlessly, how many holidays would be enough? How many relationships would be enough? You realize when you're honest with yourself, like, there's not a number, because you can't win. It's chasing after the wind. No one ever gets to the end. Because if you find someone who's like that bit ahead of you and you go after them, you're envious of them. And what happens when you reach them? Well, you just find someone else, don't you? Because there's always going to be someone. There's always going to be someone who can lift more than you. There's always going to be someone who's got more money than you. There's always going to be someone who can run faster. There's always someone more. It's chasing after the wind. It's pointless. It's a game that you can't win. And then I think this is a beautiful verse. Beautiful verse, chapter 6. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. One handful with tranquility is better than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. I'd just like you to consider now, what have you got in your one hand? And what has God given you this week? What's God given you this week? Maybe you've had some opportunities. Maybe you've got a job. Maybe you've got family, people that you care about, friends. Maybe you've got breath in your lungs. Maybe you've got a roof over your head. Maybe you've got food in the fridge. What's the one handful God has given you? Better to have that one handful with tranquility than to go chasing after the second handful. Because that second handful, that's the one that costs. That's the one that costs more than you expect. Andy Stanley does a great little riff on this. That second handful, that's going to be your costly one. The second handful, you're going to work yourself to the bone for that second handful. You're going to miss out on time with your kids that you won't get back for that second handful. You'll be so focused on chasing after that second handful, you won't notice the beauty and glory that the first handful that God gave you in the first place. The question is not what has given you. The question is, where is your attention lying? Is your attention lying on the beauty and grace that you have in this hand? Or is your attention lying on what you can grab with this one? And the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying it is so much better to live with a gratitude and an acceptance of the things God has given you, instead of endlessly looking to what they've got over there. Chasing after the wind, trying to push yourself to gather something, to grab something, to clutch at something that hasn't been given to you. You'll do yourself in. You chase after the wind, and the question is, where do you want to pay attention? Are you going to focus on what you could have and what you wish you'd had and the stuff that hasn't happened? Or can we put our focus on what God has given us and what we can be thankful for, what this hand has got in it? Better peace with this hand than toil and strife trying to grab a second handful. How do we live without the comparison game? Well, I'd suggest there's two good ways of doing it. One is to feed from the right tree. One is to turn up the volume on the truths that God is speaking over you. So you would have that security and knowledge that you are loved and forgiven. You're okay. You are accepted. You are welcome. Because if you know that, well, maybe you won't have to push other people down in order to feed your own ego. And the other one, for those of us who struggle maybe a bit more with envy and looking at what everyone else has got and we feel that we don't have it, can we be grateful for what God has put in this hand? Because there is something. As Bonhoeffer says, only with gratitude can we become rich. What's God put in your hand? Focus on that. Choose to move your attention to the good and beautiful gifts that God has given. That second handful is going to cost you a lot more than you think. Instead, lift up gratitude and praise for everything God has given us.